Brown says, get that India. Big boy.
Call an ambulance! Maybe call a priest! Oh, what a shot! What a shot! Campbell Killer!
Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Tip Sheet Podcast. As always, I'm your host, John, also known as Forty20, joining me to break down another week that was in Parradise, as well as the wider NRL and the international scene. Oh, my good mates, Sixties and Clint. Fellas, absolute blast to have you on as always. How you both been faring since we last convened for the last podcast?
Well, mate, since we last convened, we've had a presentation night that we attended this week for the Parramatta Junior Rugby League. So that was a good evening, being able to, first of all, catch up with yourself, a number of people within the Eels Club, some of the junior clubs that we've had a bit of work to do with in our Parramatta stories, and also some legends that we've interviewed over the years. So, it was a great night, actually. It was a really, really good night over at the Marconi Club. And, thoroughly enjoyed it, mate. You enjoyed it?
Oh, yeah, it was a wonderful night. As you mentioned, got to have a chance to say hello to a lot of the people that we've built fantastic relationships with in the junior district. And in the case of the former legends, players that we've had a chance to interview with fortunately great regularity in the post-game and pre-game stuff that we do at Paraleagues. And, geez, they're just wonderful characters. You can see why they're so popular. It's a shame that not everyone gets to see the anecdotes that they share, because I know you can use terms like synergy and whatnot, but just the camaraderie between these guys and the way they can just give each other a good-natured ribbing in front of hundreds of people and share these incredible stories it's so natural, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely is. And we'll be having a bit of a chat about that as we launch into our Eels news. Clint, how you doing?
Yeah, pretty good, gents. I'm coming off a week, or weekend rather, after best man duties. One of my best mates got married this weekend. Congratulations to Oren and Anne. Wonderful occasion, but come back to reality now, and and thankfully the rugby league weekend has a little bit in store for us. So got something to look forward to there too.
Yes, indeed. And before we get into the week that was and what lies ahead as well, as always, a quick shout out to the sponsors of the show, Big Swing Golf, North Mead, and Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan, and Parramatta, helping us produce and pump out the tip sheet for each episode. All right, boys, let's stop wasting time and get right into it.
News team, assemble!
And another week in Parramatta news of stuff that we mostly sort of knew and just being confirmed. We'll start off with a departure from our club. Andrew Davey confirming his medical retirement, boys, on the back of a number of concussions he sustained in season 2023, making the sensible choice given what we now know and what we're still learning about head trauma in physical contact sports. Real shame to see Andy have his career wound up early, but he still carved out a pretty nice little career for the Parramatta Eels and the Manly Warringah Seagulls.
Yeah, I liked his comments that he was quoted as saying on the Eels website and on the press release, which was basically he got to live out an NRL dream.
Mm-hmm.
People didn't expect him to play one game. Well, he got down to Parramatta. He eventually, after a period of time, made his first grade debut, got more games then with Manly, back to Para, a few more games this year. What did he get? 44 games?
44
or something
games,
like
yeah.
that?
44 games.
Not an insignificant
22
career.
for Parramatta.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and what was he, 28 when he made his debut, his first grade debut, something like that? We were privileged to be able to speak to Andy a number of times at training when he first came down. And, I mean, he was a real knockabout bush bloke from Queensland, a tradie. I think a bit of his carpentry skill was put to use around the old Para house as well, a couple of little repairs and what have you. when he first arrived. Like you couldn't have really met a more down to earth bloke, and I can also imagine it would have been plenty of laughs in the accommodation that he shared with Sean Lane. They're both very dry humour sort of fellas, and really did become great mates, sharing the place together. And it's probably a case of if this was early in his career, these concussions, maybe he might have made a different call. But given his age, the fact that he was closer to the end than the start of his career, far closer to the end, why risk it for one more year and maybe a handful of appearances in first grade? He's got the rest of his life to look forward to. He's got that trade background. He's now got a professional rugby league background behind him as well. Who knows what direction he'll go in, but I'm sure whatever it is, Andy's the sort of bloke that'll make a success of it.
Quint, any insight on how Andy wrapped up his career as an Eel?
Look, it's unfortunate circumstances, but I think it's the best decision for him. Much for the reasons that Craig has already touched on there. I was pleasantly surprised initially when Andy rejoined us this year, but I thought some of his earlier appearances before I think he got his first or maybe second concussion were actually pretty strong. He finished the year with a touch under 94% tackle efficiency, which is no mean feat. That's pretty damn solid for someone defending on the edge, and it was great to see him get a couple of tries too. I think that try he scored against the Dolphins in particular, a lovely unders line running back against the grain. So he gets to go with a couple of good memories there, and we wish him all the best for the future.
Yeah, I think that's probably the big thing, isn't it? He didn't have a long time in the NRL, but still made an impression, and he's making the right move. As we said, boys, knowing what we know and still learning about concussions and everything that has to do with head trauma, cashing out your chips while you're still ahead. Given what we saw of Boyd Cordner, we didn't talk about it in the podcast, but Cordner has been in the media talking about how he's still feeling the symptoms of concussion even years after he's retired, and he didn't get out early because he had a lot of concussions, but he got out early relative to an NRL career. He was 27, 28 when he got out, so could have played another 5, 6, 7 years even without concussion. So yeah, well done to Davey for making the sensible decision. And he's not the first Eel in recent time to do it. Before him, Keegan Hipgrave made a similar decision going back a couple of years. So putting your long-term well-being ahead of a football career is something that I can never fault. And, especially when you're talking about not just physical health, but mental health too, because the damage that concussions do, and you're talking about essentially early onset dementia with what it can do to your brain. So, well done to Davey for making a sensible call there. And we wish him the best in his future endeavours as he moves on past the playing career.
Absolutely.
Now, the other piece of news that we knew was either official or semi-official and was made official was that of Morgan Harper. Has been a bit of a polarising pickup for the Parramatta Eels, and it was made that much more confusing when the announcement detailed a 2-year deal, which was amended to 1 year, I think, or it was mixed reports, and I think it's now been confirmed as a 1-year deal, because a 2-year deal would imply a potential top 30 deal from day one, maybe. So Harper joins the Eels for the next 12 months. We believe it's on a training trial capacity initially, but he will provide depth to the back line, but not the front line signing we've been looking for, boys, but it's a warm body in the back line.
Yeah, I'm not so sure that it's train and trial now. I think that pretty much
you think
is
it
locking him in.
Locks him in the top 30?
Yeah.
Okay, well,
yeah, I think it does. I mean, I think it was a case of, there was a bit of mixed news going around when reports were first coming out about Parramatta being in talks with him, and the mail floating around was that it was going to be train and trial, and in much the same way when he's officially confirmed, we had the official announcement saying 1 year, but then media reports saying 2 years. Well, I'm thinking, and everything I've heard now is that it is a 1 year deal in the top 30, but I guess we'll soon see soon enough. But I'm pretty sure it's going to be confirmed top 30 contract. As you said, it's the response has been mixed. If anything, it's possibly not been the most positive response from Eels fans.
It's not a signing you can get excited about, wherever you're for it or against it. Even if you're arguing for it, you see it more as a sign of necessity rather than out of pure upside.
Well, the way I look at it is this, all right? He's not going to change the Eels as a premiership force. I think we're going to agree on that. Not on displayed form, and that's not meant as a shot at Morgan Harper as an individual or as a player or anything like that. That's just on displayed form.
Mm-hmm.
He's not going to change the premiership prospects. Now, where I'll come to his defence a little bit is there probably wouldn't be the reaction that there is now if, let's say, for example, the Eels had just announced that they had signed Billy Smith from the Roosters, Josh Addo-Carr from the Bulldogs, and Morgan Harper from Manly. So you would have gone, okay, there's some signings there that could change the trajectory of the Eels team next year, and a depth signing to go with it. And most people would be like, okay. But I think where there isn't any other backline signing that's happening at the moment, and where a lot of fans feel that our most genuine need is to recruit some outside backs and to recruit pace, genuine pace, they're probably feeling like, is this all that the club is going to deliver for us in the way of recruitment? And I mean, we don't know. What we do know is that he's not the only recruitment target. There are other recruitment targets that are out there. Whether they come to fruition, we are yet to see. But he's not the sole recruitment target. So I guess, geez, I don't think we should ever now use the words we have to be patient as Eels supporters, because I think I think it's a given that Eels supporters are patient. It's a given. I guess what I'm saying is we can only wait and see how it plays out in terms of what now happens in the way of recruitment. Do we get a target other than Morgan Harper for our backline stocks? So I guess that's the wait and see part.
Any closing thoughts on the acquisition of Harper, Clint?
Well, to echo where Sixties was going there, you can't help when certain players become available, and part of that situation, the reason for that situation, we put ourselves in that situation, I should say. We obviously prioritised our forward and our spine, as rightly so. But I think we're all sort of hanging out, hoping that there is an outside back or two that we can nab that will move the needle for us. And everyone's jumped down. I guess on the negative side of comments, has jumped down on this recruitment because they don't feel as though Morgan Harper fits that description. I would have to agree with those people. That being said, though, he's obviously coming in on close to near minimum wage on a 1 year deal. What his remit is for season 24, and that's that he'll start outside the top 17, and it's up to him to try and work his way in there. And obviously Morgan has a reputation the game against Cronulla, the half against Talakai that put him into the Talakai, that is, into the New South Wales Blues side. We've often joked, even here amongst ourselves, that Morgan Harper doesn't have to buy a beer in Queensland as a result of that game. But you go through his stat line, it doesn't make bad reading. We've got someone who's got a tackle efficiency of 85% for this year, average running meters of 105. You go back the years previous as well, averaging 110 meters in season 2022, with the tackle efficiency of, again, 85%. The year before, where he made himself a name for himself in the Manly backline in the year they finished top 4, he had a tackle efficiency of 89% and averaged 100 meters per game there as well. So, hey, look, he's someone who obviously can play rugby league. I mean, you don't get talked about being an NRL player without being half decent in the first instance. It's very hard to make the NRL. But circling back to where this conversation started, it's because it isn't someone who we feel is going to make us a genuine premiership threat, and it's unfair to judge him through that lens because that's not what he's been recruited to do.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you've clarified that as well in terms of that's not what he's been recruited to do, because it's going to be one of those things where you can feel it already that there's a groundswell that's anti him, right? And that is never fair on an individual player who's been recruited by the club. I think the first and foremost, the job of supporters is if players are selected in first grade to get behind them, give them a cheer, what have you. Yeah, and if there's performance issues, then it's up to the coach to make some changes. Now, it's not always possible to make changes if there's because to make changes you have to have options that are there to make the change with. And as we saw last year, if you didn't have outside backs in New South Wales Cup, because we had back rowers playing in the outside backs in New South Wales Cup last year, I mean, we simply didn't have the numbers. And that's my issue going forward, is that we need to have greater numbers of outside backs, as well as a bit of quality, bit of class, bit of speed. But in the case of Morgan Harper, you know what? Let's see how he goes. If he doesn't perform, well then, like what we saw this year as well, there were players that were recruited to the club who weren't able to perform, and we didn't see them in first grade. That was the bottom line. We had to rely on the coaches selecting players who were going to perform, and there were some players that were given opportunities to play first grade this year. They weren't able to produce what was needed, and we saw them in New South Wales Cup for the rest of the season. That's just a fact of what happened this year. So I guess it's up to Morgan Harper with the pre-season to put his best foot forward. We know he plays with a bit of attitude. That's probably a hallmark of his play, where probably draws attention to him with the hair and the attitude that he plays with and all that sort of stuff. We'll just see how he goes, but let's make something very, very clear as supporters that we are looking for more recruitment.
Yeah, I think, to use your term, on exposed form, if Morgan Harper is there starting in round 1, assuming there's no injuries or crazy preseason suspensions or something like that happen, then recruitment's probably let the team down. If he's there as a piece of backline depth and is competing for a spot, through the preseason on the back of his own efforts, that's different. But from what we know right now, based on Parramatta's needs and, like you said, his exposed form, then yeah, I would not be happy going into round 1 if that was our sole backline piece to be picked up.
Yeah. Well, look, even right now, if we picked up no other outside back, then we've got some major recruitment issues.
Correct.
major recruitment issues. Now, we're all for the talent that's coming through. By the same token, in the pathways, we got a lot of hope and belief as well in the talent that's coming through. But they're not ready now, and it's unfair to expect them to be ready now. They may be 12 to 18 months away from getting a debut. Some of these younger players, like Richard Penasini, for example, like Blaise Talangi, for example, those sorts of players. So, we just have to make sure that we've got. We don't want to be in a holding pattern or sliding further in terms of the base that we're working from. We need to be bouncing back into finals football next year, so that when some of the younger players are coming through, that they're coming through into a strong team that is a resident in finals football. And unfortunately, this year just gone has let that trend down. We've gone from being that in the previous years to a very disappointing season. One where, we're only one win out of playing finals football, but we didn't get there. That's just the bottom line. So we need to turn that around next year, and I don't think we're going to turn it around unless we can pick up a recruit or two for the outside backs. Because if we're just relying on a combination of good luck and good management to make sure that injury or suspension doesn't take too many players out of our team, well, I think this year proved you can't rely on that, because you're going to be bitten on the arse if you're relying on factors outside of your control. So anyway, that's our
nice place to wrap that up. Like we said, it was pretty much confirmation of stuff we already knew. So the departure of Andrew Davey and then the signing of Morgan Harper. Now we move on to something you mentioned earlier in the podcast, 60s, but on Tuesday night out at Club Marconi, or the Marconi Club, depending on how you want to spin it, and the Dalton House part of that establishment, the Parramatta Eels had a massive gala event for the Junior Rugby League District, celebrating their 2023 seasons, looking to champion all the fantastic volunteers and the various award winners across all the clubs. So we'll go through it very quickly, 60s, but start off from the top. Had some fantastic presentations from members of the Parramatta Eels staff, both PLC and football operations, speaking to the wide audience there. PLC CEO Chris Demu. We had obviously club CEO Jim Sarantinos and Adam Fairley.
Can we mention that amount of money that the Leagues Club granted the Junior Rugby League, because that's a fair whack of money there.
Yeah, so they sort of, obviously part of the presentation, we're talking about the PLC's responsibilities to making sure that the junior district is in the best shape it can be, and they presented a cheque for the past year to the value of $364,000, or $364,500, sorry, tack on another $500 there, and that just encompasses the last 12 months. And we, obviously we've spoken about the PLC and its relationship to the junior districts in length, 60s, both in podcast and in written form as well. Obviously doing huge things for the district, one of the largest catchments in both Australia and New Zealand. It's a huge responsibility, and they do a fantastic job looking after it.
Yeah, absolutely, and also there, we did have the representative from Trevette Subaru, who they continue to sponsor
a 3 or 4 year partnership for the junior reps now, and they've been going strong there. I think they offer a car up for raffle every year, I believe, which is pretty crazy, and all the proceeds going
so
to
it's a bit of a jump up on the meat raffles for the junior clubs.
just a little step up from the old meat raffles, and obviously they're things of legend themselves. But yeah, I think in the last 10 years, the Leagues Club has surpassed $3.5 million of funding to the Junior Rugby League, which includes supporting clubs, players, volunteers, and of course the referees. MC for the night, Lewis Shepherd, who, if you watch any of the featured match of the round, a brainchild of Adam Fairley this year, you'd probably recognise his voice. He ran the show for the club and did a fantastic job, including hosting a Q&A with club legends Brett Kenny, Eric Groff, Peter Wynn, and Steve Ella. We'll get to that shortly, 60, because I hope that was recorded and they can put it out because that was fantastic. Along with the video highlights package that was put together for the entire district itself. Sorry, getting over my words there. Which I thought was a fantastic highlight of the strength of junior rugby league and what the game can do to bring so many people together. We'll quickly run through the awards.
Well, we should. I was just going to say, we have to give a bit of a shout out to Adam Fairley here because
done a tremendous job.
He's been on the podcast talking us through some of the initiatives at the Junior Rugby League earlier this year, and we're gonna try and catch up with him in the next couple of weeks and just to talk about how this season has gone. But a number of initiatives and the media, social media coverage that has been introduced, and for people who are unaware, they have a match of the round in the under 16s Division 1 every week that is live streamed and gets that commentary provided as well by Lewis Shepherd. So they actually get exposure from as close to the match streaming that you might get, say, on New South Wales Rugby League is provided through the Parramatta Junior Rugby League socials. I highly recommend people check out their Instagram page for the photos, the videos with young kids. Not only the highlight of them playing and the fun they have with that, but the chats with them about the various topics, everything from their favourite food to favourite subjects at school and what they love about playing footy and that sort of thing. So there's some great moments that have been captured during the year. I think once you've had one visit to the site there, you end up going back and we'll talk about one particular video when you go through.
The recipients there.
Yeah.
So we'll start with the big ones, going across the various clubs that picked up major gongs. Wentworthville United Magpies taking out the overall club championship. Good to see Wenty having a big year there. The Junior Incentive Shield, which I believe encompassed a broad range of initiatives and community aspects, including growing the game and other aspects, not necessarily just like the sort of main ones that you usually recognise. Went to All Saints Toongabbie. Obviously, All Saints have been incredible pioneers in the women's space, Sixties and Clint. No surprise to see them picking that up there. The Modified Incentive Shield went to Cabramatta. Club of the Year was the Guildford Owls, which I believe was the club that was the most successful. I'm not sure. There's also the club championship.
No, that was actually one that was voted on by the other
That's
clubs.
That's right. Sorry, yeah. So that to clarify, they gave out polling points to every club, and essentially they rated them based on their interactions, both on and off the field of these clubs on a 3-2-1 basis. I think it was 60s, and
I can't remember, but I just know it was voted on by their peers.
Yeah, and the Guildford Owls picked that one up there. Secretary of the Year went to John Burns of the Wenty Magpies, or the Wentworthville United Magpies. So a couple of big clubs there picking up good gongs. In terms of the individual awards, the major ones, the Philip Carey Memorial Award for Male Player of the Year went to Lachlan Metcalf of the Wenty Magpies. Lockie had a fantastic little highlight reel there, kicked the 40-20, had a clutch short kickoff and a conversion to take a game to tied status with just seconds on the clock. So they had a fantastic job there. The Jam Bryan Award, which was the inaugural edition of it for the Female Player of the Year, went to Chloe Sacalotto of the Kellyville Bushrangers. Coach of the Year was split between Judy May Penny of the Wenty Magpies and Craig Colnane of the Hills Bulls. Ref of the Year went to a young fellow by the name of Bailey Clark, who had plenty of spunk. Actually, I like the way he carried himself for a young ref. And then Try of the Year, well, you want to get onto that Instagram that Craig mentioned, because this one had over 15 million impressions, I'm pretty certain. It went viral worldwide. It went to a young lad who was a big unit by the name of Viliotu Masila of the Marylands Rams. The big fella had an all-time... I mean, this is the sort of try he's going to be talking about in his 40s and 50s when he's having a beer at the pub, about the time that he took the kickoff 2 meters off his goal line.
And he'll be able to provide...
He's got the receipts, yeah. He's got the receipts. Took the kickoff 2 meters off his goal line, damn near beat the entire team en route to going length of the field to score a try. Incredible effort, and it's a great little bit of video. The other try of the year, the try of the finals went to Matthew Kenner. young lad from the Borkham Hill Brumbies who had a big trial for kick chase. So did a great stuff there. And, I mean, the reception to both those tries and all the other tries that were in competition for the spots there was fantastic from the audience in participation. And it was a very good vibe there across all those things. Any words on those tries there, 60s, or the ones that didn't get the major gong maybe?
Look, all I wanted to say right now was on our site, and obviously it's on the Eels official site as well. We've listed all the different people that received the awards for being the volunteers.
Yeah, because it's an exhaustive list because there's a member from each of the clubs in the Parramatta Junior District, which I think is a great initiative, but also means that there's about 30 people you got to acknowledge.
Yeah, and it is important to acknowledge them because Junior Rugby League, the foundation of it is people giving up their time, people volunteering. And really the evening was all about acknowledging and celebrating all the efforts from everyone across all of those clubs. It was great to see the reception that was given to all of the award winners, no matter which club they were from. Everyone was, acknowledging everyone else. And you know what really summed it up was when the Guildford Owls representatives collected their award, and they quite humbly said, you know what, other clubs set the bar so high, and they use the examples of what they experienced with other clubs and have tried to emulate that to the best of their ability. So they basically said, look, we took the example from all of you to try to be the best that we could be. So, it's our thanks is to every other club that's there. And I thought, that it really did sum up the vibe that was in the room on the night. It was a very positive vibe, and quite an enjoyable night. Rounded off, of course, with Eric Groth.
Yeah, I was going to let you talk about both Eric Groth's band performance and I say band, but his guitar performance, and then also the interview. I'll leave that to you, mate.
Oh, look, the interviews were. I mean, we've had a lot of chats with these legends and they never disappoint. So it doesn't matter what the venue is. If you get the opportunity to go in and listen to some of these yarns yourself, it's really enjoyable. And especially if there's more than one of them, because if you've got more than one, what you know is you're going to get a swapping of yarns, and you're also going to get a bit of good-natured ribbing to go along with it. And it was I did quote Brett Kenny in my report on TCT, where he was asked about the Panthers three-peat and about what it was like for himself when Parramatta won 3 in a row. And he just said, yeah, look, it got a bit boring, actually. After the third, it was like, well, there's another game we won. And another 2 tries. So
out of context, it obviously sounds very arrogant, but in the context, he was being very jovial and carrying on in a fantastic manner. And I got to say, poor Peter Wynn might need to get some rib guards on because the amount of ribbing he got from all 3 of them there. But yeah, you had Steve Ella making fun of Eric Groth for being a winger. You had the boys riffing on Pete Wynn. You had Brett Kenny taking the mickey out of himself. The rapport between that entire team, but the 4 boys that we saw there obviously is fantastic.
Well, Steve Ella, what was funny was Steve Ella saying, everyone knows that try that Eric Groth scored against Canterbury in the finals, where he beat like about 7 or 8 players on his diagonal run to the try line. And he said, but, he doesn't get any credit for setting him up.
And then Brett piped in saying, I passed it to you from dummy half.
And I think Eric replied with the only time Steve used to throw him a pass was when he ran out of room himself. Like, here, you better take it. So, look, it was great. And look, we've been really fortunate over the years to get to speak to these fellas quite informed, like both formally when they're our guests at the club after games, and then of course informally because we've had the opportunity to share a yarn and drink with them before and after games or at events like this. So it was great to catch up with them, and so it was. Look, it was a great night. Really appreciative of the club for our invitation to be there, and we're glad to be able to share that with you both in our written report and also having a chat here in the podcast about it. So and it's good to be able to talk about such positivity within the district, and again a shout out to all the goals that are being kicked in the junior league in the Parramatta district, because the junior clubs are such a vital community resource, and the consistent message that we hear from a lot of coaches about, it's not about producing winners, it's about producing people who are the best that they can be, that are good citizens, that have good values and can contribute in a positive way to their community. And I guess these people that are the volunteers are the best example of that, the best role models, because they're giving themselves. And if part of that means that these young people, these young players turn around and in the future they also contribute in the same way, and they give back to the community and the club by being involved in the club themselves as they get older. And I think tends to be a tradition in clubs with that. Well, I think that's fantastic, and communities are always going to be better off for having junior sports clubs, not just rugby league clubs, but all junior sports clubs, because it is such a positive factor in the community, isn't it, for kids to be involved in some form of sport. So great evening, and great positive thing to be able to talk about.
And we'll get into a recap and preview of the Pacific Championships that happened last week and obviously this week coming. But we'll quickly run through the Parramatta Eels that are in action this week, boys, as I go through the NRL.com Team List Tuesday announcements. So I'll just run down each team as they present them. So we can start off with the Kiwi.
John, can I just actually say the Eels did a good job. They actually gave the Eels players to watch for each of the games.
Oh, there you go.
If you don't mind, I'll just run.
Yeah,
through
you jump straight in. You've got the ace in the sleeve there.
Yeah. So in the New Zealand versus Samoa game, which is on Saturday over in New Zealand, we've got Dylan Brown and Woody in action for New Zealand, and Junior Paulo Dejan Arce for Samoa. In the Kiwi Ferns versus Tonga, which is the earlier game at Eden Park on Saturday, we've got Cassie Toei Hiku, Jade Whenua, Amelia Murphy, Shannon Muru for Tonga, and Capri Pacquiao for the Kiwi Ferns. And I'm not sure whether we've got any of those that are actually on the bench or maybe on the reserve list. Then on Sunday, the Fiji versus the Cook Islands, we've got Micah Sevo and Wonga Blake in action for Fiji. And the earlier game, which is this is up in Port Moresby, is the PNG Orchids versus the Cook Islands. And we've got Elsie Albert in action for PNG, so she's making her comeback match. So we'll have a bit more of a talk about those matches, but again, for anyone that's interested and wants a recap on that, the Eels have put it up on their website, the Eels players that are expected to be in action this week. So you can go there and check that out.
Is there anything to be made of the fact that Wonga Blake's still listed as an eel in that article? Or is that more of a...
until October 31 this year,
True.
Which is the end of the NRL contract year, and the game is taking place before then, so still considered an eel up until that point in time.
I do note that Cassie Toei Hiku's in the halves of Tiana Penatani for the Matamai team, so I don't know how that's going to work out. You got a couple of our backs there. I mean, it'd be awesome to see Cassie with more ball in hand. I'm not complaining in that regard. but no organising half there for the team could be a bit of a handbrake for their ability to compete.
Yeah, look, I think it'll be when we look at those matches in the tips, and you give a bit of a run through on the team lists, we'll make comment on some of those selection decisions. I think because they could well be match defining.
Yes, indeed. All right, that concludes the Parramatta portion of the news cycle. So let's move on to the general NRL and international stuff. We start, as is unfortunately way too often with the NRL, in the judicial system, with Junior Amone being found guilty of was it assault causing physical bodily harm or just general assault when he was going MC Hammer earlier in the year. He has been found guilty, but sentencing has been postponed to early December. I think the 6th of December is when they're going to return to court. Obviously a pretty big blow to the Dragons. He should be sitting out for some time. I do have issue with this insofar as the inconsistencies of the no-fault stand-down. A man that's been found guilty of assault was allowed to play versus some of the other stuff we saw this year. So not huge of the NRL's consistency there, but what do we make of this one, boys? The Dragons are already in a bit of a rut when it comes to their roster construction and the personnel they've got and the talent pool they're sort of tapping into. Is this a loss to them, or is a sort of streaky, inconsistent talent like Junior Amone, who has a lot of potential but hasn't really realised it, not that big a loss?
I guess it's only a loss when it actually becomes a loss. So we'll see what happens with the sentencing, and then how the NRL follow that up with the Integrity Commission decisions about any stand down that might impact him. Obviously, if he's given a prison sentence, well, that's the first step in his time out of the game. And I guess after that, the NRL has to decide when and if he's allowed back into the game, should there be a prison sentence. So there's so much up in the air in terms of conjecture, but the Dragons have allowed players to leave. We know they struggled around the halves this season. They couldn't seem to settle on where Ben Hunt was going to be for a while there. They've recruited Kyle Flanagan. Is he an answer? Are Dragons fans going to be into Kyle as much as what the fans at the Bulldogs were? Did they recruit him to be a half or a dummy half? I mean, look, the one thing that we know about the Dragons is they have failed to deliver for multiple years now, for probably a variety of reasons. I'm not sure that they're all necessarily coaching reasons. I think there have been some recruitment issues that are there. I think maybe there's a cultural issue at the club, which was evident by their presentation evening last year, where people basically didn't turn up. What was it? Something like 4 players or something like that turned up to their end of year presentation night. So yeah, look, I think they've got some deep-seated issues within the club. Whether Shane Flanagan can get on top of that nice and quickly remains to be seen. But man, this is never a good thing. We saw what happened with Jack de Belin just going through the long process with the trial, where he was eventually found. Well, he wasn't found. Was he found not guilty, or was he found not a case stand? I'm trying to think what happened with Jack de Belin now, where whether it was a straight out not guilty or one of the other sort of verdicts, which meant that he was that he wasn't convicted. But anyway, it's the disruption that it puts on the team, the dark shadow that it casts across the club. Nobody wants that. So
to clarify for you, 5 of the 6 charges, the jury was unable to reach a verdict for Jack de Belin, and on the 6th he was deemed not guilty. So, it, obviously one of those like grey outcomes when it comes to the court case for de Belin. But yeah, for Amone, his playing future very much hangs in the balance pending that sentencing in December. Clint, what are your thoughts on this one, mate? Do you like how the NRL handled the process, the inconsistencies in the no-fault stand-down, which, I know that it pertains to the different jurisdictions in terms of, I think it's domestic violence and things involving women in general. But when you had a man convicted of assault with a hammer, should he have been stood down from day dot?
Look, if you want to look through the lens of equity here, and taking on board that you have noted that there is some differences based on the charges, but there's going to be people from different clubs that look at this situation and go, well, hold on, and there'd be a little bit of whataboutism about it. This is the guy who's now been found guilty, but he was able to play throughout the year, and he's been found guilty of a crime that could have him have a potential jail sentence. Yeah, I have some questions about the consistency, and granted, the NRL aren't lawmakers, but they are policymakers, and what we'd like to see is absolutely a transparent interpretation of that policy, something that's easily understandable for the everyday person, so that when some of these situations, and unfortunately there will be future situations of it, we don't wish any of that on anyone, but there will be future situations for the NRL to handle and deal with, that they can do so with a little bit more transparency and communicate a little bit more clearly, so that the wider rugby league public can understand and interpret it themselves, as opposed to us all scratching our heads going, well, hold on, this situation was that and this is that, so how did you end up at this interpretation, and why can player A play but player B can't, and so on and so forth. So, and as for the nature of the crime that he's been found guilty of, one of the more bizarre assault charges I think I've ever heard of. To be charged with hitting someone with a hammer and causing grievous bodily harm? Did we say?
I wasn't sure on the. Hang on, I'll skim this article so I can find. But
irrespective, still a very strange and peculiar situation, and you kind of wonder how someone gets themselves in that situation, be it an NRL player or not. So he now has to face the courts for sentencing, and I'd be very surprised if we see him playing NRL again, to be perfectly honest.
Well, I think the reasoning behind him not being stood down ended up having to do with the level of court that his case was going to be heard in, so that I think he ended up being a trial before a magistrate, as opposed to a trial before a judge. And also, and where there was a difference, I think, with Dylan Brown, was that Dylan Brown straight out pleaded guilty to the charges that he was up against, so that it very quickly moved from the no fault
through the courts and through the court system as a result.
Yeah.
So Amone had a string of charges, boys. Just to clarify, it's not a small one for his record, but damaging property, intimidation, entering a building or land with intent to commit an indictable offence, assault occasioning actual bodily harm. He pled guilty to a few of them, and then obviously either took no contest or guilty to the rest of them. But yeah, so it's going to be a nice little rap sheet for him.
Yeah. So what ends up happening is it's not going to be positive for the Dragons, and whether he's able to play again at the level of the NRL remains to be seen. I guess players have gone to prison before and came out and rugby league became their second chance. He's still only very young, so it may well be that he's given an opportunity. If the sentence isn't too long, who knows what the NRL may decide at some point down the track. But it's not good for the Dragons. It's not good for rugby league in general when you have these sorts of things happening where someone's found guilty of chasing people with a hammer. It's like, not good at all.
No.
So Yeah. Anyway, let's move away from the negative, eh?
Yeah, and move on to the big news of the week. Something that was reported on earlier in the year, and I think actually directly involves TCT in a way, 60s, and that's the sort of increasing momentum towards Papua New Guinea being the 18th franchise to enter the NRL. Got a bit of traction this week. I think Bishop was reporting on Twitter about it becoming increasing favourite to be the next franchise to join the National Rugby League. There's talk about Australian government putting funding in, about the NRL putting funding in. We all know that PNG are absolutely rugby league mad, and TCT's own very good, I suppose, correspondent and a good friend Joey Grimer departed from the Parramatta Eels in part to help the Kumals and PNG get to the NRL. He's in charge of their pathways and development, or the elite development systems in PNG now, and this would be a massive step towards. Well, the rumours would indicate that they've taken a massive step towards being the next NRL franchise.
Yeah, well, it's for a franchise to be selected, they have to have all of their structures and systems in place, and that's where Joey was recruited. He was targeted. He was headhunted by the franchise to take on that role of setting up their pathway systems, and that's obviously right up his alley. Doing that, he loves getting his teeth into setting up those sorts of structures and working with young players. So he's just recently had, I think, some junior teams that were selected. When he first moved up there, he sent some videos of the early days of trials, and just the number of young people that were there trying out for some of their elite squads, and just the difference in the fact that they don't have things that a lot of players here might take for granted: the boots, the gear, the elite fields, really, that players here get to play on. And when we may not necessarily think of local council grounds as being elite level grounds, well, I can tell you to be elite level grounds compared to what the young players up in Papua New Guinea are playing on. But they have such a passion for the game. So look, if you've got a country where rugby league is the national sport, if you can get them to be professional and competitive to such a degree that they can be part of a national competition like the NRL, then it's only going to be great for the game. I'm hoping that the Kumals, well, we don't know they're going to be called the Kumals. They wouldn't be, because that's their national team. But this PNG franchise is successful. We obviously have that personal investment in it with our good mate Joey, and wanting to see him successful. But it's going to be great for the game. Now, that doesn't mean I'm opposed to a team from Perth, for example. Like I still think there is a place for a team from Perth, and whether it's got a link to an older team such as the Bears or what, I don't know, and I don't get to be a decision maker. But I think at some point down the track, just the difference with the time zones and what have you, to me, makes it a great natural fit for TV coverage.
Yeah, Perth makes a lot of sense for the TV deal, 100%.
So, but the mail is now there for PNG. What's your thoughts on that, Clint? Do you think it's going to be a great thing for the game if a team from Papua New Guinea becomes the 18th franchise?
Look, I'm pro PNG, but there's something about this that doesn't smell quite right to me, and it's from the geopolitical perspective. I want a PNG franchise. I want it to be successful. I also want it to be done the right way. And I'm not entirely certain, gents, whether this is the right way. And
controversial opinion coming here, Clint.
Well,
Warning.
Yeah, we might signal the siren here a bit, ring the bell. Because a lot has been made of this from a geopolitical perspective and in terms of Chinese influence across the wider Asia Pacific area, and obviously Papua New Guinea makes up part of that area. And I don't like a sporting franchise being used as a potential political pawn. And what's to say that if it's used one way, it can't be used the other way, and then throws any potential NRL competition into jeopardy because it's being used as such. Now, obviously, I'm talking many, many, many steps down the line here, and we're obviously having a very preliminary discussion about this at the moment. And as I said, I want a PNG team. I want them to succeed. I want it to be done under the right circumstances, though. And there's a little bit of politicking going on with this from a number of angles. Obviously, Albanese wants some goodwill with this as well, which you can understand. And he's a rugby league person too. And look, we're rugby league people as well. And we have a vested interest in rugby league growing and being the biggest sport. But at the same time, I don't want there to be an opportunity, I guess is what I'm getting at, for any rugby league team or club to be used as a political pawn or as political goodwill in a grander game that's being played. And so I'm sort of shifting into a bit of protective mode here, that the assets, being our teams and our players, aren't at risk of anything from that. Now, again, I don't know what that may or may not be, or what that could or could not be. But when there's whisperings around the geopolitical angle with it, it just sort of sets my sniff test off a little bit. And I go, I don't quite like where that's going. So
basically, you like politics and sport to be completely separate. Is basically what you're saying.
In this particular instance, yes, because there is a point where they will collide. Sport's one of the great unifiers in the world. I think the only other thing that really can attest to that, and they probably all come under an umbrella, is entertainment umbrella, is music. Sport is one of the great unifiers, and we should leverage that. But at the same time, given some of the geopolitical tensions that exist across the world at the moment, and Australia obviously trying to shore up its place in the Asia Pacific, and have allies there. I don't want rugby league to be used as a pawn in that. Rather, I would want any Papua New Guinean bid to survive on its own merit, and then likewise be something that, irrespective of anything that's going on in the world at any point in time, not be used as leverage or even potential collateral damage in anything that may happen.
Now, just on this one topic that I would want to discuss at the moment, because I think we can segue it a little bit when we're about to talk about Jarome Luai testing the market, is let's assume that the PNG bid is successful. Where do you think they would go in terms of recruitment? Do you think they would recruit a large number of their top 30, or do you think they would have a rather large number of places set aside for their locally developed talent? And if so, what sort of ratio of the top 30 do you think that would be PNG local talent? John, what do you think?
That's a tricky question. Yeah, I wonder what ratio of their top 30 you'd think would be from the PNG pathways themselves. Is it half, 2/3, 40%? Where's the sweet spot in terms of being competitive in the NRL and also furthering the progress of rugby league development in PNG? I'm really not sure. That'd be a fantastic question for someone like Joey Grimer. I'm not sure if he'd be at liberty to give us exact figures in terms of his role there with the organisation, but that is a very good question. It's probably plus or minus 5-ish% on half the squad, you'd think. Like, you're going to need, and if you're doing that, you're going to need a very good core of seasoned NRL players to help that squad build up. because that's
Yeah.
a lot. That's a lot of inexperience in the roster. I know they've got a Q Cup team in the Hunters that have been there for a number of years now, and that helps. But there is, as we all know, there is a significant jump from both Q Cup and New South Wales Cup to the NRL. So if you're talking about half your top 30 roster being from your pathways, from an inexperienced, or I say inexperienced, but a straight up rookie franchise, then yeah, you need some serious heavyweight hitters at the top. Otherwise, you could even scale it down to maybe a third, but with a prerogative to bring that up year on year. So I'm not sure which is the better approach, but maybe you start smaller and build up, because we know that recruiting for a new franchise is difficult. The Dolphins had Wayne Bennett, and they struggled to bring stars in. Even though they did well, they struggled to bring stars in. They had a lot of high-profile players saying no, and that is a more appealing area to move to as a NRL player. And I know that they're talking about playing games in Cairns and Port Moresby and whatnot and balancing that. But you're talking about Redcliffe versus Port Moresby and Cairns. Even Cairns itself isn't as appealing to me as Redcliffe. So it's a tough sell. And I'm sure they will get some stars, but we saw, like with the Dolphins, that even with the super coach there, it's not easy, at least in the first year.
Yeah, and it would be. You'd have to think as well. They'd need to spend over and above market price to get stars.
I wouldn't be surprised if there's also cap concessions given to them as an expansion team that has a particularly difficult mission to achieve, and I wouldn't be too upset with it. They'll certainly get developmental concessions in regards to trying to keep their own young talent or poaching talent. But even at the top level, I wouldn't be surprised if they get cap concessions. Maybe not officially, like not to announce to the world, but in terms of their actual operations, they'll be allowed to go above what the other teams can do in order to get competitive or get established as a competitive outfit in the first few years.
I think we've already seen from their national team that there is only a small scattering of PNG players that are playing in elite competitions in neither Australia or England. So they are definitely going to have to look beyond homegrown produced talents. Clint, what do you think? Do you think they would have a percentage sweet spot that they'd be looking at in terms of that? I know we're a long way down the track talking about it, but I just thought it'd be a point of interest.
I'd imagine there'd be some guiding principles and part of their long-term strategy where they would look to, over the course of time, shift as much percentage to homegrown players as possible. And then, obviously they have a whole country to pick from there. And we're talking about a country whose national sport is rugby league, as you touched on earlier, the only country in the world to have rugby league as its national sport. Look, I'd imagine with the view to doing that long term, they'd obviously have a number in mind in the immediate term as well, if they were approved to be the 18th franchise. So, look, further to that, I should say, or in addition to that, though, and an extension of the point that you made about there only being a percentage playing, they obviously would have to recruit players from all over to fill the gap in the meantime, as the development pathways fruit takes time to bear. So, you'd probably look to a lot of players back over in the Super League with an opportunity to potentially come either rejoin the NRL or join the NRL for the first time there. You'd look at some players within the Queensland and New South Wales Cup competitions who probably plays on the precipice looking to break through. And, there'd probably be a handful of NRL players who'd probably get paid above market rate and break some contract records to get there. That would probably comprise of the make up their squad in the first year or two.
Yeah, and as John mentioned as well, the team would probably be based out of Cairns, playing matches in both Port Moresby and Cairns. But you would imagine that NRL players with young families wouldn't necessarily be looking to relocate to PNG as somewhere to live. And that, I'm not saying that as a knock on PNG at all, but it's when you're trying to recruit high profile players and their families from, probably some locations in Queensland and New South Wales, coastal locations or what have you, especially if they're already very well paid. There's going to need to be a really good selling point, and maybe that selling point might be Cairns rather than Port Moresby. I can't really talk about. I've never been to Papua New Guinea. You can only, but what we do know is that it is a different way of life up there to how it is in Australia. So there is that cultural difference that will exist, and for that reason, maybe as you say, they're going to very much rely on their own pathways down the track. They'll probably look to bring a number of players home, inverted commas, from that are playing around for different teams, different competitions, and then maybe their top players from the Q Cup would go to the bottom end of the top 30 and into development squad positions, so they could effectively probably have 10, 11 players that are homegrown, as well as 24, 25 players that they recruit elsewhere, and that'd still be a very good mix, wouldn't it? Like if you recruited that many players into the team, like a couple of dozen players into the team, and then could still have another dozen or more locally produced products, I think that would work out well as far as their numbers when they first start. So now, John, I just touched on Luai.
Yeah, Jarome Luai picked up some new management, Black Money Enterprises. Most notable clients include Jack Whiten, Latrell Mitchell, Cody Walker, Bradman Best. And on top of that, and I imagine it's a two-way street here. I think the Penrith Panthers made it clear that he wasn't their priority. Dylan Edwards and the like were. He's going to go to the open market. So he's going to go test and see what his value is on the open market. I mean, the man's just won three rings, so it's not like he's short in premierships for his career catalogue. He would very much go and take the dollars from a lower tier NRL club now. Do you expect him to do that, boys, or do you think he's going to go to the market, get his value, come back to the Panthers and maybe work something out?
Look, I think it's interesting because I think there's probably a mixed perception of Jarome Luai out there. Would I be interested in Parramatta recruiting him? Probably not.
No.
What sort of clubs would be interested in recruiting him? I think, your clubs like West Tigers, Bulldogs would be up near the top of the list. Probably the Dragons would put themselves in that mix as well. So look, I'm sure there maybe even the Raiders, but and I guess as far as the coin is concerned, those clubs that I mentioned would possibly play top of the market value,
900 million,
because I think they probably would. If you said to the Tigers that you're a chance of recruiting a premiership winning 5'8", would you be prepared to pay $900,000, $1 million if you knew you could get him? I don't think the Tigers would have any hesitation, given what they've paid out. They paid out that sort of money for Luke Brooks, didn't they, in the past?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So, and continued to pay him when they weren't even making finals football.
Well,
his money still stayed top of the market.
The Brooks contract is one of the greatest albatrosses in the history of the modern game. And that also, I mean, that's one of the big things to look forward to in 2024 is we finally get an answer to the great Luke Brooks conundrum, don't we? About the relationship he had with the Tigers and who was at fault, whether both are pretty ordinary, which I think is the most likely outcome, or whether, he was being held back.
I'll put myself out on a limb here. I reckon he'll produce better for Manly than he ever did for the Tigers.
I don't think that's outrageous. I also don't think he's a great player, though. I think he's just going to end up being an okay half at Manly. In regards,
I think he'd be a good club halfback.
And this actually dovetails nicely back to where I want to go to with Luai. Brooks, will have the benefit of playing outside Daly Cherry Evans next year, which is obviously a massive upgrade in terms of the personnel he's played with in the spine at the West Tigers. In fact, the best half he's ever played with in his tenure at the West Tigers was the short period he had with a very raw and underdeveloped Mitchell Moses. And since then, it's been just a turnstile of borderline first graders, and yeah, that's about it. Coming back to Jarome Luai, I think there is a very significant buyer beware for any prospective signer of that particular player, because much like how Luke Brooks is going to prosper from playing next to Delhi Cherry Evans and maybe having a fit Tom Tebojevic available, Jarome Luai comes from the most talent-rich team in the competition. He is literally the luxury, the surplus part of even a team that had a weak dummy half position this year, he was the most surplus to requirements part of their spine. When he was out, Penrith just kept chugging on. Nathan Cleary, Zai Yo, Dylan Edwards, they're the real, the heart of their playmaking core there. And any team that's buying Jarome Luai needs to be cognizant of the fact that you're going to be getting a streaky, run-heavy guy who is an opportunistic player at his best. He plays best when the team has been opened up by his other teammates, his big forwards or dynamic backs, and can get into sort of pseudo-fractured play or open field play from there. And I think that's a real... If I'm a prospective buyer, I'd be very scared by that fact. He hasn't got a strong kicking game. He's not an organiser. He's a, I'd say average defensive half. I wouldn't call him, terrible by any means. I don't think he's particularly strong in that regard either. So when you're doing that and you're going to be paying that guy $1 million, if you're the Tigers, the Bulldogs, whoever it is, you've got to be wary of that. You've got to know that if he hasn't got a strong halves partner or even a strong spine to facilitate the sort of gameplay that he needs and to put him in the positions to capitalise, you'd run the risk of getting a guy on a lot of money that won't be able to produce.
I can't disagree with any of that. I just think there will be clubs.
He's going to get paid. The guy's won 3 rings. He is absolutely dynamic when the play does break down a bit and defenses can be opened up. There's no doubt about that. He is dynamic. He's got a great highlight reel. He's played rep football to varying success, but he's got the receipts there. He is going to get his payday, whether it's at Penrith where he knows he works in that system for $300,000 less than what the market rate is. I don't know. He'll have to take a pretty big hometown discount to stay out in the westernmost parts of Sydney, given that they've loaded up their roster elsewhere for other retentions. But if he does go somewhere else, that's the reality. He's going to get paid. Whether you agree with my opinion that he is a flawed but talented player and maybe not a good fit for a team that's trying to build up to a premiership without the control pieces in place, he is going to get paid one way or the other.
So, Clint, who's up the front of the queue waving the checks with Jarome and his manager going to market?
Say Canterbury Bankstown's probably front and centre there, making plenty of noise. You mentioned the West Tigers there as well. Depending on what happens with Ben Hunt at St. George Illawarra over the course of the next 12 to 24 months, they'll be having a sniff. I even think the Canberra Raiders might be there having a sniff about as well. I think there'd be something about the way that Jarome plays and his attitude that would mesh well with Ricky and the Raiders. I've got a feeling it'll be Canterbury and Canberra, to be perfectly honest. He'll be there making the most noise and keen to make a splash with the cash.
And if you were forced to nominate one team that would be the most likely to secure him, out of those, who would you think?
It'd be the Canterbury Penrith Bulldogs.
Yeah. I was thinking the same as well.
Yeah, I think Canterbury.
Like
Canterbury certainly feel like they're making the moves to free up the space again, don't they? With the talk about Josh Adokar being on the outer and the Tavita Pangai Jr. moving on from rugby league, they've opened up the cap space requisite to make the sort of splashy signing in the future that would be in line for Jarome Luai. I don't think it's a great fit for him. I think between Burton and Luai, who would be their presumptive halves pairing, they haven't picked up anyone else I can think of. You're playing two players of similar talents across the two playmaking positions, and that traditionally doesn't lead to a lot of success.
Yeah. You look at it and you go, there's not really a team general out there with either of those two. Yeah, agreed.
Alrighty.
Well, fellas, that probably brings us to the time for our tips for this week's
Yeah,
matches.
we'll do a quick wrap-up of last week's action, very quick. Just I think everything sort of fell the way we predicted for the most part, boys. In the Women's Pacific Championships, the Jillaroos just pipped the Kiwi Ferns 16-10. I think I actually did say that there would be a tight victory for the Jillaroos, so get put a little feather in my cap there. The Fetu Samoa overran the Fiji Bulakula 26-12. Parramatta's own Lindsay Tui bagged the double in that game. Good to see. She was out in the right wing, I believe. And then in the men's championship, the Pacific Championship, the Kangaroos too good for Toa Samoa 38-12. No surprises there. Again, that we talk about, the importance of having an organising half or a general in the field. Probably something that Samoa lacked. Looking at their spine, they had a very good back line, a very good forward pack, but their spine of Young Far Longo, then you had Stephen Crichton, a centre, turned 5'8", Parramatta's own Dejan Arce, and then a dummy half. They had Justin Matamua playing there. Isn't he a back row by primary trade for West Tigers, I feel like?
Yeah, I think he's a lock forward.
Yeah, he's 185 centimetres, 103 kilos. Very big for a dummy half. So, that was the big handbrake for them. And Australia obviously just very hungry in the particular contest, started sharp. And then maybe the extent of the scoreboard a bit of a surprise, but the PNG Comals, they put the pain on the Cook Islands I2 46-10. And it wasn't a full house out at Port Moresby, surprisingly, but they're still very raucous. It was a good day for Nana McDonald. He had the double Hattie, 4 tries, and alongside tries to Laybutt of the Zach variety, a double for him, Robert Darby and Valentine Richard, as well as Appel Capinius. So a good day for the Cummels at home. But yeah, I think sort of to a T, all the results within our purview right there.
Well, I think for a start, I just want to talk about that PNG match, and it relates back to the what we were talking about before with them with the franchise. What we know is that they play their rugby league with passion, and every time they're in a match, they will just compete to the best of their ability. And I think they turned up ready to play as they always do. I don't think the Cook Islands. I mean, I know that there's the Cook Islands don't have. They didn't probably have some of the better Cook Islander players that play in the NRL or players of Cook Island heritage running around for their team, but I expected a bit better from them. I really don't think they delivered.
No.
They did lose their half to injury.
And they also lost in terms of Parramatta stakes, Makesi Makatoa to what we're not sure whether it was a shoulder or pec injury, but the big man did depart the field and didn't come back.
Yeah, so look, it was a disappointing performance from them, and I'm sure that they weren't expecting that sort of lopsided scoreline. They would have had some hopes of being able to maybe even jag a win against PNG, but by half time they were probably not lucky, but I think it was a good thing the game did not really get away from them any further in the second half, and that it ended up a closer contest in that second 40 minutes. And I know the wind, strength of the wind may have helped them to stay in the contest a little bit better, but probably fortunate that it didn't blow out any worse than it was.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, let's get into our
into the previews. We'll go back to the Women's Pacific Championship. So on the bye this week are Australia and I believe Fiji in the 6-team competition, which means the action starts on Saturday, 1:45 p.m. With the Kiwi Ferns hosting the Mate Ma'e out at Eden Park, Auckland. That's going to be a bit of a banger. Eden Park, one of the famous parks of 4-footy. So the Kiwi Ferns coming off the narrow defeat to Australia, taking on the Mate Ma'e Tongan team. In terms of the Eel representation, 60s, you mentioned it before, but Capri Paikau, she's on the interchange bench for the Kiwi Ferns. And then in the Mate Ma'e team, we've got Cassie Toei Hiku starting at 5'8". Shelley Malangi used to be an Eel. Amelia Murphy was with us this year. She's in the back row. Foliaki was a former Eel. Jade Fanua on the interchange. So there's another, and Shannon Muru. So two more active Eels there. Then you had another former Eel there in the extended roster, and Fatafehi Hanisi. So Eels well represented one way or the other between current and former players there. But yeah, the Kiwi Ferns looking to they didn't embarrass themselves by any means against Australia in the 6-point loss. They'll be looking to go one better though and get their campaign underway with a win here against the Mate Mate Tongans. How do you boys see this one playing out?
I think the Kiwi Ferns, they did particularly well, I thought, against Australia last week. I honestly believed it was going to be a bigger scoreline than that. I think they'll be a little bit too strong for the Tongan team. And you've got to be honest with your tips with these things, and I think they'll probably win by about 20 points.
Yeah, I think there's a pretty healthy win in the mix here, Quint. Do you see it the same way? And if not, who's going to be the important players for Mate Mate Tonga to make this one competitive?
60 took the words right out of my mouth. I have a 20-point victory to New Zealand here, but I'm going to look at one of our current girls and one of our former girls in the halves there for Tonga in Kasitoa Hiku and Tiana Panatani. If there's any signs of hope for Tonga in this match, you'd think that both of them, as predominant runners, are going to be at the forefront of everything, and they're very much going to have to rely on a power game through the middle third and asserting some ascendancy there, so that the 6 and the 7 can hopefully run right, because you don't look at either of them as traditional kickers of the ball, but they are both very strong runners of the ball. And if they've got bodies in motion around them, they've got enough pace themselves to show and go and go the full mile, or to set up their outside players. So if there's any hope for Tonga exists within those two players and playing a certain game plan and having that unfold. But it's hard to see that taking place when you look at this New Zealand side.
Yeah, the simple fact you've got two admittedly very talented outside backs, one more of a senior statesman now in Tiana Panatani, and one a young up-and-coming star in Kasitoa Hiku, up against just Racine McGregor as a playmaker, really puts the Kiwi Ferns ahead. McGregor's one of the good organising halves in the competition in the NRLW, and she's going to give the Kiwi Ferns a huge advantage over Mate Mate here. And it's going to be hard to see the Tongans getting into the arm wrestle by virtue of the fact that the disadvantage of having the kicking battle is going to be significant. So hopefully they can make it competitive, and hopefully Cassie can have a chance to shine.
Well, I just wanted to add there about Cassie is that in her playing in the spine, for me, I'm looking to see what she does there, because we've talked about her potential to play fullback.
Mm-hmm.
And really, the fullback is another playmaker.
Yeah, it's essentially
so she's now in a playmaker role. We haven't seen her kick in general play, but we also know that she's got a huge boot on her, because she kicked a line dropout during the season that went over 50 metres, and we've seen her take some kickoffs as well, and she has got a strong boot on her, but it's not just having a powerful boot that's the key to a kicking game. Of course, it's the placement of the kick. So this is going to be interesting, and of course, the placement of the kick also comes hand in hand with reading the game and knowing. Is there a time other than on the last that you do want to put a kick in? You might go the early kick. You might mix the kicking up in terms of the type of kick that you put in the air, whether you put up the spiral torpedo, whether you put up a floater, whether it's just the end over end, whether you're just going for the territory. Well, there's a whole range. There's a nuance to the kick.
It sort of just adds the idea of why halves get paid the big dollars, don't they? Because there is just so much. Even though rugby league is a simple game, there is just so much nuance to the position and getting your team running on time, like clockwork, making the right calls under pressure. So, yeah, the big thing I suppose here for Cassie, being in the halves, she shouldn't be starved of the ball, as you sometimes see when you're the talented centre, but in a team that hasn't got good halves on the international scene. So she'll be the one of the first two primary points of contact from dummy half. So hopefully she can have a good game. which brings us to the
Yes.
second game in the Women's Pacific Championship. This one taking place on Sunday, 1:45 p.m. back in Port Moresby, Santos National Football Stadium, with the PNG Orchids taking on the Cook Islands Moana. Only one representative for the Parramatta Eels in this game, and that is, of course, Elsie Albert. Hopefully her calf gets through this one unscathed. We need her to be in tip-top shape next year, but she'll be a core part of the PNG Orchids. We're going to knock over the Cook Islands. You don't want to talk down, but probably two of the smaller status teams in this competition here in the Orchids and the Moana, with Australia and New Zealand obviously leading the sort of the title chase up top. But how do we see this one playing out, boys? Who is the favourite, I suppose, and if not, can you see an upset here?
Well, PNG would be the favourites, I would imagine, in this one. It's much. There's a little bit like last week where there's an element of the unknown with the match, and I think we saw last week in the match between Fiji and Tonga, wasn't it? Fiji and Tonga in the women's.
Yes.
No. Yeah. Fiji. Was it, or was it Fiji and
Fiji,
Samoa?
Samoa.
Yeah, Fiji, Samoa. Yeah. I mean, that was a really entertaining game. We were hoping for an entertaining game, and it delivered. It absolutely delivered. And I guess I'm hoping for the same with this one, that you've got two teams which aren't heavy on experience, maybe more in the range of players with potential, players looking to establish themselves a little bit more, maybe a touch more experience in the playing together for the PNG team. I'll probably tip them just on the basis of them having the home ground,
field advantage, baby. Yeah.
or and maybe a little bit of extra experience. So they'll get the money for mine.
You going to go with Craig on this one, Quint?
Yeah, look, it's to echo your sentiments, as I feel like I've done all throughout this podcast, Craig. It is very much a case of the unknown, but I do see some more familiar names in the Auckland side than I do in the Cook Island side, and it'd be very un-Parramatta of me not to cheer on our own Elsie Albert, who you'd like to see lead from the front and do well.
Neither team loaded up with NRLW talent. A lot of players looking to make a name for themselves. So a chance for them to showcase their wares and maybe earn NRLW contracts for the season moving forwards. But yeah, I think the Orchid's going to be too good at home. And I got to say, I was just looking at their logo. That's actually a cracking logo for the Orchids. That's really cool. I do like it. So bring us to the male competition now in the Pacific Championship, and we start on Saturday. No surprises as part of that double header, and I do like that they're doing double headers here for each week of the competition. Saturday 4 p.m, Eden Park, Auckland. We get to see the first look at the Kiwis in the international circuit this year as they host Toa Samoa. In terms of the boys representing the Eels in this game, you've got Dylan Brown, who will start 5'8". Wirumu Greg has been named in the extended roster. Unfortunately, he's just missed out on selection, it looks like, with the team choosing to take Kieran Foran as the bench utility ahead of him, it looks like. And then on the other side, of course, you've got Junior Barlaw captaining the Toa Samoa team, Dejan Arce in the halves. This one, Samoa looking to bounce back from their tough loss to Australia there. Kiwis looking to start their campaign with a bang. They're going to be in front of what you have to imagine be a fairly parochial home crowd. But we do know that Tonga and Samoa are very well represented in terms of fandom in New Zealand. Famously, I think that Tonga's had, sort of 50-50 splits in some of the home games there, or away games that become home games for Samoa there. So hopefully the Samoans so hopefully Samoa can do the same. But again, they're going to be doing it tough in the halves. Crichton and Arce, it's not the sort of halves pairing you're hoping for when you're taking on, one of the world's top teams in the Kiwis.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'd have to agree there. And look, it's going to be interesting to see that level of support for Samoa over there in New Zealand. I mean, we know the Tongans get massive support over there. Look, I think there's probably going to be a bit too much class from the New Zealand perspective. I think they'll get the job done. Samoa, I guess they're a international team on the rise, without question. I mean, for them to get through to the final last year of the Rugby League World Cup was a tremendous achievement, but as you say, it's just, you look at the spine and you have to go, well, look, the halves, there's just that edge for the Kiwis, and they'll get the job done. On the back of that.
Yeah, Nickel Clockstar, Dill Brown, Jerome Hughes, and I suppose the weakest link there, Fa'amanu Brown at dummy half, up against Sualavi Fa'alongo, Stephen Crichton, Dejan Arce, and Gordon Chan Kum Tong, who was the scratch last week, who was replaced by Justin Matamua on game day. It is a golf in class and talent there, isn't it? And just also experience in not just high leverage NRL games, but high leverage international games, and it puts both the Kiwis and Australia as well with their spine so far ahead of the curve when it comes to these big games.
Yeah, absolutely.
Clint, you brave enough to pick the upset here, or do you think New Zealand do it comfortably?
Not a chance am I brave enough to pick the upset, but what I do hope for is that that these games and this experience that Dejan's getting in particular for Samoa against a good Australian side, a good New Zealand side here, sets him in good stead moving forward, because he's playing against a different caliber of player than, I guess what he regularly comes up against, having been in and out of the NRL team throughout the year. So, hopefully this is an opportunity he can use it to launchpad his season moving forward. And likewise, if we call upon him, hopefully not for the halves, but maybe in other positions in the back line throughout the year, that he feels well prepared and uses this experience to his advantage moving forward.
I will tip the Kiwis to win, but I think it'll be closer than Samoa's loss to Australia. I think the combination of Samoa having a chance to build off the loss, and the Kiwis maybe coming into this game a little bit underdone with the having to wait the extra week into the international competition. Maybe they start a little bit sluggish and give the Samoans just a bit of a crack in the door to get their foot in there and make it a bit more competitive.
I think it'll be tight in the first half, and then I think New Zealand runs away with it, wins with a margin of somewhere between 15, 20 points.
Okay, that is reasonable.
At the end of the game.
Quint, how do you call it, mate?
Yeah, look, I like where you're going there, 40, with it being tighter and the factors at play with New Zealand maybe being a little bit rusty. I still see New Zealand running away with it, but I'm going to go a slightly smaller margin, and I'll go that 10-16 margin for New Zealand.
And wrapping up the action on Sunday, we have the Fiji Bati taking on the Cook Islands Aitu, 4:00 p.m. Santos National Football Stadium in Port Moresby as part of the PNG double header there. Fiji Bati having a couple of eels, well, one we expect to be next year, Marcus Sevo, and one employed, as you said, Quint, until the end of the month, essentially, in Wanga Blake. So Sevo on the wing, Blake in the centres. I suppose looking at this team, notable players, you got Jareem Buller at fullback, Saniga Taruva in the centres, Brandon Wakeham, Tui Kamikamifa, Tane Milne. So a good smattering of pretty good NRL talent there for the Fiji Bati. And then for the Cook Islands, we covered them last week, but you got the Masters boys, Brad Takarangi, David Moali, Ruan Gatakura, Zane Tedavano, Pride Peterson Rabati. So, yeah, not as many high-profile names there, and the Cook Islands certainly struggled against the Kumals. Are they going to struggle against the Bati boys?
They are going to struggle. It's again, it's I mean, there's a couple of unknown names or lower profile names in the Fiji team, but by the same token, there's also plenty of class in their lineup, and it'll be far too much.
Pretty good backline.
Far too much.
Buller, Sevo, Taruva, Blake, Ravalawa. So plenty of big units in the back line there. And, yeah, I think if they get any sort of quality ball, not even quality, any sort of like 50-50 opportunity, like even sort of spread, they can definitely punish the I2 out wide. And yeah, it's not a home field advantage for either team, but I think that Fiji, the biggest issue for Fiji will probably be Fiji themselves. Sometimes they can get into a bit of a rut or a slow start, but if they get anywhere near a decent start, they will run away and win this one pretty handsomely, I think. Is that how you boys see it too?
Yeah, I'm gonna say they win by a similar margin to what PNG won by last week. I think they get it done by about 30 points.
Yep. Clint, how do you call this on, mate? Final calls for the podcast.
I think that back five of Fiji are going to run absolutely riot at Port Moresby on Sunday afternoon. If I'm one of those outside backs, I'm licking my lips at the opportunity to play this weekend and put my name up on the 6 o'clock news.
I think
highlights.
Brandon Waken's probably in line to have a decent game too. He's not a high quality NRL half, but he is a sort of borderline NRL half, and that puts him in pretty good stead when it comes to these sort of competitions here. So I expect him to have a pretty good game unless he overplays his hand. But yeah, Fiji by a pretty healthy margin. And that, if I just quickly check the news to make sure nothing's broken in the recording time here. No, nothing there. And we go over here. I think we might be in the clear, boys. Knowing our luck, we'll have a breaking news as we finish the recording. So that'll bring a wrap to another edition of the Tip Sheet Podcast, boys. As always, before we sign off, a quick shout out to the sponsors of the show, Big Swing Golf, North Mead, and Star Partners Real Estate. I'll be shouting them out there. Let us get the podcast out every week. And a big shout out to you two boys for putting up with me for another episode. Thank you very much. It's always fun to have you on yapping and yarning about footy and the Parramatta Eels. But 60s, I'll let you take us away, mate.
Go you mighty Eels.